Today, the most powerful banker in Russia quietly admitted that the system is going broke. Gref, the head of Sberbank, said that the ruble is far from its real level. He said that the fair rate is around 100 to 105 rubles per dollar. Right now, the rate is in the high 70s or low 80s. Moving from 78 to 105 is not a small correction. It is roughly a 34% loss in the currency's value. That's not a market wobble. It is a planned seizure of purchasing power from the Russian citizens. And inside the Kremlin, this is a shot across the bow. This means that fortunes, secret accounts, and elite lifestyles will be sacrificed to pay for the war. And when one group of elites pays the bill while the other ones keep the power, inter-court wars become inevitable. Vladimir Putin is preparing to pay for his losing war by smashing his own currency. He will not cut missiles, nor tanks, nor propaganda. He will cut the value of every wage, every pension, and every savings account inside of Russia. This is all part of something larger. It is the fact that today, Putin's economy is collapsing. My name is Jason Smart. I'm a special correspondent for the Kyiv Post and National Security Advisor. The situation is quite complex for the Russian economy, and every day it gets a little bit worse. And so let's take a look at this today. Let's look at what is really happening, why it is so bad, and why today the most important banker in Russia is admitting that the economy is falling apart. But before we go on, during this critical era as Ukraine is being forced into peace talks, help us get out the truth to the world of what's really happening here in Ukraine, where I am, and what is really happening inside of Russia. Because once you see how weak Russia is and that Ukraine is prepared to fight, it's very clear whose side we should be on. The means by which you can help me are very simple. Please like this video, subscribe to this channel, and consider becoming a channel member today. And do leave your comments below. So one last thing before we go along. We just delivered more drones to the fighting men in Sumy who are fighting off the Russian invasion there. They would like to thank you for your donations to help them get more life-saving drones.
We, the Jihad Battalion, thank Jason J. Smart and United Unmanned System for purchasing the necessary equipment. It helps us save lives in the Sumy region. We thank everyone who helps us and support us. Slava Ukraini! Разом до перемоги!
Thank you everyone who's made a donation. If you haven't already, please do see the first pinned comment below of how you too can make a donation for the soldiers to get more drones. So at the same time that Russia's economy is falling apart, it's facing other problems, like drone strikes that are hitting the refineries deep inside of Russia. We saw the recent one in Samara. It can process more than 8.8 million tons of oil per year, but that oil refinery, which is putting out 176,000 barrels per day, was destroyed by the Ukrainians, more than 1,000 kilometers, 620 miles from Ukraine. That facility was producing jet fuel for the Russian aircraft that bombed the Ukrainian cities. And when that facility burns, it also means that the budget bleeds. And when the budget bleeds, Gref looks at the numbers, and he demands a weaker ruble. But when the ruble falls, loyalty inside the Kremlin also begins to fall. The one man in Moscow who cannot lie about the math is Gref. Gref is the only person who has to tell the truth. The politicians can lie, the TV hosts can lie, the generals in the front also lie. But the one who has the numbers is not dealing with propaganda. He's dealing with numbers. Gref is the longtime head of Sberbank, Russia's largest bank and the backbone of the financial system. He shaped Russia's modern financial architecture and is a barometer of elite anxiety as the economy contracts. For those who don't know, this coming out from him is pretty big. And that is not a small deal. The fact that somebody that is so intimate to the Kremlin is admitting how bad the situation is simply incredible. It's actually quite shocking. So when the ruble was trading around 78 to 79 per dollar, Gref spoke at a forum. He said that the rate was far from equilibrium, going on to say that about 100 rubles per dollar was more fair. Later, he told some other investors that 100 to 105 rubles was acceptable per dollar. That corridor is pretty wide. He's also been giving some other forecasts that are not very good for Moscow. By the end of 2025, he expects that the rate will be about 112 to 115 rubles per dollar. This is in public. He is saying this. The 2025 budget was originally built around a much stronger currency. It assumed something near the mid-90s per dollar. When the ruble briefly strengthened into the low 80s, oil tax income collapsed. The finance ministry suddenly lost billions of dollars equivalent in expected revenues. Putin can promise stability on television, but today, Gref is warning that the current model cannot carry the war at a strong exchange rate. The equilibrium here does not going to mean fairness for the citizens. It is going to mean survival for the regime and for the budget that feeds the war. That is where the elite conflict begins. The television can promise one thing about victory and stability, but those who work in finance understand there's not enough cash, and that's why today they must loot the middle class. Putin is prepared to lose tanks, but he is not prepared to lose his bankers. Today, Russians live in an economy where the rate sits around 70s or 80s, and today, if that's fake, if that's not real, if that's not sustainable, it means that everything is going to get more expensive. People can expect to pay 34% more if it reaches 105 to dollar. If it moves to 112, well, they'd be paying 40 to 45% more for their groceries. And this is all in addition to the fact that the VAT tax is about to increase. Russia already went through waves of inflation after 2022. Devaluation will trigger the next wave. It will strike people who have already cut everything that they can. Meanwhile, the elites watch the same process at a different scale. Their children study abroad. Their doctors are abroad. Their properties are abroad. A weaker ruble quietly taxes all of that. As the money pool shrinks, every ruble of the budget becomes a weapon in the elite infighting. Devaluation will only make things worse. Imported parts and finished vehicles will cost more in rubles. Fuel prices will face pressure as taxes and costs rise. Families will keep aging cars longer and postpone every big purchase. The war is already forcing Russia's middle class to downgrade their lives. A 34% hit to the currency, it multiplies that pressure. It narrows Putin's room for a long war. Even if no protests appear tomorrow, you can be sure there's greater tension now inside of Russia. War spending, sanctions are the reason that today the economy in Russia is doing badly. And now, with what Gref is saying, it's about to get far worse. So some might ask, why is it that Gref is pushing for a weaker ruble while Putin is claiming that everything is under control? Well, since the full-scale invasion, war spending has exploded. Russia is paying for mobilized troops, mercenaries, and occupation forces. It is funding new units, new propaganda, and structures across the country to have greater security, which means greater control of their population. This is a permanent war budget, not just a limited operation. And the main lifeline, oil and gas, are having significant problems. They each bring in tens of billions of dollars of profit per year, but sanctions are forcing Moscow to sell at a discount. Shipping, insurance, and rerouting add extra costs to every barrel. And as sanctions tighten and discounts widen, Moscow's net income further shrinks. Each month's revenue depends more on global prices that it cannot control. The space for fiscal mistakes is becoming ever more narrow. Gref has described this current situation as being, quote, a perfect storm. High interest rates are needed to stop inflation and defend the currency. Those same rates crush investment and consumer credit. At the same time, the ruble remains overvalued for exporters. A weaker ruble is the regime's crude fix. If each $1 of oil converts into more rubles, the budget looks healthier on paper. But the fact is, it can claim that everything is fine, that it's meeting obligations, but we see real living standards are going to totally collapse. For the elite, this is a forced choice. Either the war machine is fed with cheaper rubles, or the currency is protected and the war budget snaps. When the money available for corruption shrinks, allies start hunting for each other. And every time technocrats like Gref speak honestly about the numbers, they expose the gap between the propaganda and the reality. That gap is where the elite paranoia begins to grow. It is important to note that this will not be a temporary setback. This will be very long term. Real living standards will continue to slide for years to come. Inflation will not explode probably in one day, but it will grind steadily through the food prices, the utilities, and the services. The middle class will stay quiet, but will become poor every single day. But there's something else that's going on here. It's very important. Moscow will depend on its relationship with China. Any sort of change in its relationship with China, any challenge in buying things from China or importing, will destroy the situation in Russia. Every new tank, every new missile, every ship will cost more in real terms. China has already raised prices on key dual-use goods that it sells to Russia. The price has gone up by about 87%. For other countries, similar goods have risen by about 9%. But a weaker ruble multiplies that premium. In the dynamics of this war, this sort of massive change in the Russian economy means something a little bit different. Every successful strike on a refinery or on a Russian ship will now hit twice, once in metal and once in concrete, and once in the exchange rate and the budget. For the West, what we see going on today is something else. This is an opportunity to bring Russia to its knees. This is an opportunity today to make sure that Russia can no longer fight war, and that Russia for years to come will not be able to engage in war. The objective we must have right now is singular. We must at this point engage in economic warfare. What is it we need to do today to make sure that the Russian economy cannot recover? What is it we need to do today to make sure that the economic situation in Russia becomes far worse? Now, considering within Russia the number of banks that lack liquidity, they simply don't have enough, we know that any day there could be a colossal failure of the banking system. That would be a failure that one bank begins to collapse, and the next one after it then collapses, and the one after that also collapses. This cascading effect across the banking sector, it's not just hypothetical. In fact, Kremlin think tanks have been writing about it for months. They warn that if there are not major changes in what Russia is doing now, they could face a default of all the major banks in their country. It sounds incredible, but the truth is, it could be even worse than how they report it. Keep in mind, a Kremlin think tank, it does have to put out some truth, it has to have some logic to it, but it also has to be careful and guarded in how it phrases it. It won't ever say that we are facing a total disaster, but it can say we're facing cascading defaults in the banking sector. Now, for the average Russian, we know that things are difficult for them. We know that because today, unemployment is only about 2.2%. That seems very good. But when you have an employment rate that's that low, it's not good. That actually means there's extremely high inflation. And that's why today, the vast majority of Russians report in polling that they're looking for a second job. And of those looking for a second job, about half of them say it's been unable to find one. And the reason is very simple. The economy today in Russia, it's not really an economy. It's an avatar of one. It is really a war economy where the government is endlessly pumping more money into projects, and that keeps things going, or the appearance that they're going. But whatever goes up must come down. And today, printing more rubles is not going to make the situation better. It will only make the situation far, far worse. So look ahead at what happens next. Pay attention to the ruble, because really, it's happened before in Russian history, and could certainly happen again. If the ruble begins to collapse and the Putin regime does not respond quickly, which it won't, we could expect that, truthfully, this war could come to a very rapid conclusion, because there might come a day that the Kremlin stops paying its soldiers. Thank you for watching. Please like this video. Please subscribe to this channel. And please consider becoming a channel member today. And leave your comments below. And at the very end, when you get the option on the screen to click on the next video, please do so. It really, really helps us with the algorithms. As always, thank you for supporting Ukraine.